that the Catholic Church in Nigeria had become too much about money. Any honest-minded person knows this is true.
Pax Christi, Nigerian Catholics. Now, a trending video of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie criticizing the Catholic Church in Nigeria, particularly a certain Father Christopher Eze and Bishop Paulinus Ezeokafor, both of the Awka Catholic Diocese, has surfaced online. Now, she had made all these statements at a gathering held at Eko Hotel and Suites in Lagos, Nigeria, speaking before Nigerian legal luminaries at an NBA conference, that is the Nigerian Bar Association conference that was held in Lagos. This was where she made these damning criticisms of not just this particular Catholic priest, but also of his bishop. And she had made some very critical observations that a lot of ordinary day-to-day Nigerians relate with a lot. Take a listen to what she had to say and draw your own conclusions.
In this context of a more nuanced understanding of tyranny, please permit me to tell you a personal story. About 2 years ago, I gave a press interview in which I said that the Catholic Church in Nigeria had become too much about money. Any honest-minded person knows this is true. It is flagrantly, self-evidently true in so many churches all over this country. And the point of calling this out is so that church leaders might curtail this unchristian practice, which is driving people away from attending services. Anyway, this criticism of mine appeared to upset quite a few church leaders, not all of them, because I think it is important to note that there are a few notable church leaders who are able to acknowledge the truth in constructive criticism. But it takes just one leader who is unable to take criticism to taint the perception one has of all leaders. Some months after I gave that interview, my mother died very unexpectedly. And this not long after my father had also died unexpectedly. In fact, I had by this time forgotten about that interview. But the priest in my hometown, a man called Christopher Eze, had not. And so at my mother's funeral, while my siblings and I sat in the front pew, our minds still in disbelief and our hearts broken with grief, this priest began to crudely and verbally attack me for daring to criticize the church. Later, his bishop, his superior, who apparently was also upset that I had dared to criticize the church for being materialistic, supported this priest. I spoke privately to a number of Catholics I respected about this incident, the sort of people who speak out boldly about government corruption. And I was struck by how quick all of them were to tell me, don't talk publicly about this, don't go public. A friend, who is no longer a friend, who is also very outwardly religious, told me that he would take me so that we could go and beg the bishop, so that the bishop would reprimand the priest, but quietly behind closed doors, hush, 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 for the sake of peace. But I was not asking for peace. I was asking for justice. I wanted the bishop to do the right thing, to take responsibility, to reprimand the priest in the same public way that the priest had desecrated my mother's funeral, to set a precedence for consequences, and therefore make sure that no other priest would turn what is often one of the saddest days of a person's life into a venue for settling petty scores. Anyway, that did not happen. I can tell you that as I stand here, I am still filled with a shimmering, glowering, unending rage. But why did I choose to tell you this story? Because it made me realize how often in this country we sweep aside injustice in the name of peace. But it is always a fragile and hollow peace. Because as long as we refuse to untangle the knots of injustice, real peace cannot thrive. And so in the name of peace, we say things like, okay, just leave it. Okay, it's enough now. Okay, it was very bad, but you should just stop talking about it. Okay, just manage it now, we don't do. And by saying these, we continue to make mediocrity our norm. We fail to hold leaders accountable, and we turn we fail to hold leaders accountable, and we turn what should be transparent systems into ugly, opaque cults. My experience also made me begin to think that there is something dead in us, something dead in our society, a death of self-awareness, a death of self-reflection, a death of compassion, a death of intellectual curiosity, a death of the ability for self-criticism. And I think it is time for a collective resurrection, so to speak. We cannot refuse to practice self-criticism and yet criticize the government. We cannot ignore the abuses by our religious, our traditional, our community leaders, and focus only on the abuses of political leaders. We cannot want to hide our own institutional failures while demanding transparency from government institutions. The first question we must ask is, what is the right thing to do? Not what is the materially beneficial thing to do, or what is the institutionally beneficial thing to do, but what is the right thing to do? Because if we do not do this, if we continue to sweep away injustice for the sake of a hollow peace, then we will leave behind for our children and their children an utterly bleak inheritance.
Is all that she shared before this gathering relatable to you? Do you have any experience of some of the things she had shared happened to her, particularly at the demise of her late parents? A lot of Catholics, as I said earlier, seem to agree that she had shared what they too had passed through at the hands of some of our Catholic priests especially from the southeastern part of the country. At the end of the day, there is a lot we can draw from her statements. The focus on money, particularly from the southeastern part of the country, has become a signature tone of Catholic worship in that part of Nigeria, especially towards the end of the year. Many people have been through some very harrowing experiences where they are denied some certain sacraments of the church simply because a relative had unpaid debts and levies, and because of that, those sacraments will be denied that relative. Many people have shared their very disheartening testimonies about how they were literally embarrassed because of some of these demands that were made on them by the church. Whatever you make of what she shared before this gathering is left to you, but something has to change, particularly as it concerns the way we treat one another as a Christian body.